Dr. McConnell, in answer to a question from Senator Gosh, you talked about AEMO and the ISP being very transparent with all the data they put forward. I would agree with that. There's an enormous amount of data that goes in there as inputs. Was I correct or were you trying to say that the outputs are less transparent or less accountable? Is that because all that input goes into almost like a black box, and just a result comes out and you can't see why that result was achieved?
In a nutshell, yes. So, the resolution of the data that goes in is extremely high. The resolution of the data that comes out is quite low. It's sort of, annual level information as opposed to half an hour or some, particularly if you're thinking about some of the challenges that are facing our system around, or potential challenges around, difficult weeks in 2035 and so on, and understanding some of those dynamics. That's not really something you can easily explore or analyse from what is published in the results. But there's a whole range of potential outputs that are not there.
Yeah. Thank you. That black box lack of granularity is akin to a lack of accountability for the product that is coming out. Is that fair?
That's from my perspective, that's absolutely fair.
Do you think that sort of process or that modelling would that answer the question as to why the ISP only puts forward transmission projects and not other forms of projects that should be pushed forward?
I think that's actually a high level issue in that the ISP is still notionally a transmission planning document. That's its role in a large to a large degree. It has evolved, but if you look, its origin it is a transmission planning document. So it is in some ways unsurprising that transmission is the answer that comes out of that. They have moved, they've improved their processes and considerations around the different inputs that go into that, but as a transmission planning document, the outputs and how they get used in the processes are very transmission oriented. But that's a higher level question than the detail that comes out. You could perhaps infer some of that, or you can, and people do. You can say we need to do X, or infer information from that. But you could infer more, or have more confidence in the results, or more insights if more of that was made publicly available.
Thank you. It's interesting that you look at the 2018 ISP, the 2024, and the 2018 was far less transmission oriented, or at least had other options. Do you think it's fair that our integrated system plan should go beyond just or have such a heavy transmission focus?
Well, that goes back to the roles and responsibilities question, and what is the role and point of the ISP, and if it is supposed to be a broader, larger system planning exercise, then it should absolutely go beyond transmission planning. But yeah, that is, I guess, a different role than it has historically played, and will, in my view, require some governance changes to AEMO or to the institutional settings and frameworks that within which AEMO sits, because to date that has not happened.
One last question: do you think from when it was first set up, it was set up to be independent of government and a market? Do you think the re-entry of governments, particularly state governments, and how they're directing different projects to happen, do you think that's having a negative impact on the planning process and on the transition's potential success? It's
certainly having. Well, where I see this is not so much a negative or positive question, but an accountability question, and like who is responsible for decisions made and things that are taken into account in these processes. Those lines of accountability are a bit blurred, and there is some role confusion, and there's sort of this issue of AEMO reflecting government policy and being held up as an independent source of advice when in actual fact it may be just reflecting decisions, government decisions. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but except for this sort of accountability and transparency point where it's held up as an independent system planner when it is actually very much doing planning activities for different jurisdictions.
An important point, very well made, Dr McConnell. Thank you. I thank both witnesses for appearing today.